All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Ed Talk on virtual reality. I'd like to thank AdCom for inviting me to do this webinar. To be honest, it's my first webinar, as I think for some of you it might be as well. It's quite exciting. I'll be talking for around 20 minutes about the subject of virtual reality, talk a little bit about some of the developments, the things that we see now, and then we'll look a little bit ahead on what I think at this point are the biggest challenges that we can find ourselves for virtual reality at this time. So my name is Oscar Bastians. I work at the NHTV, the Breda University of Applied Sciences, at the Academy for Digital Entertainment. I'm a lecturer here and a researcher in the fields of virtual reality, semiotics, multi-narrative design, and some other fields. And lately, throughout the last 4 years, I could say, with my own lab, the Creative Lab, we've been working quite hard on developing 360 film, virtual reality, trying to unravel the mysteries that lie behind it, and try to at least give an idea on what lies ahead. Because we could say that for many years now, we've been fantasizing about this possible alternate reality existing next to ours, that there might be a planet besides ours that in a way has the same people but completely different lives. It all started in the 60s with books like The Veld, and now it has grown from this fantasy to a seemingly possible reality with the rise of virtual reality. Especially the film The Matrix, of course, has really teased us with the idea of a future where all mankind lives in a simulation in a virtual reality. And now with Facebook and Oculus Rift and the whole social virtual reality, as we've seen, being able to be in a virtual reality together with other people at the same time, is quite an interesting development that seems to move us forward more and more towards something that could be compared with the Matrix. If we look back at time, if we look at where virtual reality really started to become a bit more apparent, we could say that the American scholar Ethan Sutherland was one of the first in the world to create a, virtual reality headset, or as he called it, the ultimate display. This is a picture of the ultimate display in 1965. And he stated it would be, or the ultimate display would be a room within which the computer can control the existence of matter. A chair displayed in such a room would be good enough to sit in. Handcuffs displayed in such a room would be confining. And a bullet displayed in such a room would be fatal. And he said that with appropriate programming, such a display could literally be the wonderland into which Alice walked. And already, if we look back in time, 1965, it's quite remarkable that back in that day, we already had very good ideas, or at least even Sutherland had very good ideas on what virtual reality should be or could be in the future. And you might notice on this description, if you look at the picture, there might be some similarities between what we now know as the Oculus Rift, or something like the HTC Vive, the Google Cardboard, the Samsung Gear. There are multiple of these devices out there right now, gaining in popularity and slowly becoming available to the masses. One of the big differences, though, if we compare these headsets that we have today with the headset of Ethan Sutherland, is that the device, the ultimate display, was not as portable as the devices that we see now. And of course, the quality was a lot less. But the ultimate display was actually mounted to the ceiling because of the weight of the actual headset. If you try without it being mounted to the ceiling, it would kind of crash down on your face, and you run the risk of breaking your neck, which doesn't seem like the most pleasant virtual reality experience out there. But it does go to show that already back in that day, we were quite some steps ahead of time as we might think now. Now it might seem that virtual reality is something completely new, while in fact, as we can see, it's something that we've been playing around with for quite some time now. Now, all in all, major steps in the last 10 years really have been taken to develop these displays to the best qualities as possible. Continue to develop in the future more and more. There's a lot of funding coming in, and a great deal of thanks is owed to the American military that have been training soldiers in virtual reality for a very long time, since the 80s actually, in secret. During the Cold War, the American military saw billions of dollars put that in virtual reality, because I mean, nothing's better than, if you can imagine, a soldier training in virtual reality with tactile feedback, suits, or guns that give you the idea that it's real. If you would get hit, that the suit actually provides you with some tactile feedback, so you notice what's happening where you're being shot. And if it goes wrong, the soldier gets shot, the advantage is we can stop the simulation at that point. We can look back at the footage that we've taken and then ask ourselves, okay, what went wrong here? What could we improve in the future? Are there certain things that you missed out on? And that offered the military some very personalized training. I think we could see the same with flight simulators, which later, of course, became more popular for the regular gaming. But slowly and surely, we see now more and more that when virtual reality is really able to transport us into this completely different world, have a completely different idea on where we are, it's a very powerful experience that really offers itself for training purposes as well. However, with this big rise in virtual reality right now, we see a shift in some of these different industries as well. Right? It's not just gaming and entertainment, but we can see that slowly other industries like tourism, like health, like education, and of course gaming and entertainment in there, but they're slowly starting to make a move to virtual reality. More and more companies are really aiming to have a virtual reality experience available for their company, for their industry. And I think there's huge potential when it comes to, for example, tourism. When we would like to preview a holiday, and sometimes I talk with my students about all this, and I ask them the question, will we ever go on a holiday in the future, or will we just go on a virtual holiday? I'm not saying that we can expect this to happen within the next 10 years, but I think if we look at the pace of these developments, it's not unlikely that we might be moving towards something where virtual reality becomes very common in our daily lives. Even now, you can see more and more people coming up saying, like our guy from Tesla, Elon Musk, saying, this is already a virtual reality. This is already a simulation that we live in right now, which is a very interesting thought and a very interesting debate, because of course we do not know what happens when we die. Will we take off the VR goggles, or will we be sent to heaven? So we can see this happening in more and more industries, especially in education, as you could have seen with, of course, the training of the military, but at the same time, we're able to create simulations that otherwise might be too complex or too expensive to create in real life. And therefore, we can reduce the cost for education drastically. If you look at health, how doctors can do surgery from the other side of the world using virtual reality headsets to really have the idea that they're there, and therefore perform perhaps a little bit better than they might expect at first. The big thing that's happening right now, I think, is of course the PlayStation VR. It's been out since October, and I think that this device will probably be a huge boost for the VR industry, especially around Christmas, when most of the people will probably get this as a gift, or buy this as a gift for the loved ones, and that will really be a big boost, because we'll suddenly see that a lot of households will have virtual reality headsets in their house. This might be specifically for gaming, but of course there are many other opportunities. And I think as well, if you look at advertisement in general, and use of virtual reality and advertisement, there's more and more happening, especially when it comes to sports and 360 film as an example, because we can see the big difference. There are animated virtual worlds, but there are also 360 cameras now available on the market, and more people believe that branded content is actually a very big one for virtual reality. That if you're watching the game, a sports game, that during halftime we can put up a virtual reality headset with branded content that shows us some exclusive insights in anything outside of the stadium, or perhaps in the locker room, or perhaps we hear the final motivational speech of the coach to the team. But I think a very, very important question, because I've been doing this talk on VR for quite a while now, but not necessarily this talk, but the biggest question is, once the wow factor starts wearing off, once we're not as amazed by virtual reality because it's something completely new and something that we haven't really seen before in our lives, what happens next? And we must be careful with setting our expectations to VR a bit too high, because now it's a huge hype. You can see it everywhere. A lot of companies are investing lots of money in the development of this. And I think a very interesting model to take a look at and talk about innovation in general, but also virtual reality, is something called the Gartner hype cycle. Gartner is a research and advisory firm, and in their hype cycle, they look at the different stages of innovation, and it's almost the same for any innovation. The model is broken down into 5 phases. The technology trigger, then it moves up to the peak of inflated expectations, triumph of disillusionment, and slowly builds up to the slope of enlightenment, and then starts to stabilize as what they call a plateau of productivity. Now, what do all those different elements really mean? First of all, a technology trigger. Usually we can see here, there's an early proof of concept of whatever is might be made. There's not really a real product yet that's ready for the market. I think if we compare it to virtual reality, the best comparison might be the very first Oculus Rift, the DK1, Development Kit 1, which was only available for content developers themselves to at first get an idea on, okay, once we have this device out there, what can we do with it? What's really the proper content to deliver? During the technology trigger phase, there's also not really a very sustainable business model or a business model at all. And I think you can see that sometimes on these Kickstarter campaigns where they, like Oculus Rift, they started that Kickstarter, where it's more of a big idea that seems highly ambitious, that is highly ambitious, but we aren't by the idea of the possibilities of this technology. I think now maybe VR has settled in a little bit more. Same with augmented reality, but we can see, for example, hologram technology slowly starting to get a place in this technology trigger phase of the Gartner model. If we look at the second stage, the peak of inflated expectations, we see that there's usually a proof of concept, really something that works, something that we can show to the consumer, that we can show to different businesses, and the expectations of these consumers, of these businesses towards the technology itself and what we expect it to be able to do, how we expect the experience to be, is set. And as you can see in the model, usually that's a lot higher than most of the companies can actually accomplish, which causes a lot of these technologies after this high peak to kind of drop down. Now, in this phase, sometimes some companies already really jump on the bandwagon, start investing a lot of money. We could see Facebook buying Oculus Rift a while ago, Google coming up with many VR applications like their own cardboard. But most of the times, like I said, it simply does not meet the demands and expectations of the audiences, of the different consumers. Which means that when we get to that stage, that's a triumph of disillusionment, interest wanes. People feel less interested in the technology itself because it simply does not meet our expectations. And I think virtual reality is slowly starting to get to this point, because we've seen more and more proof of concepts out there, like PlayStation VR, like the Samsung Gear. People are unbelievably excited, but I also notice the more time as time passes and we do a lot of demos for a lot of people, in virtual reality, we see that if it's the first time ever they try it, they're super excited and everything's cool. It doesn't really matter if the quality is up there. But slowly but surely, we start noticing that if people have tried it a few times, they start to get a little bit more picky. They start saying, well, the quality isn't that great. So all of a sudden, it's not really as exciting anymore, and interest starts to wane. Now, the fourth stage, the slope of enlightenment, means that after a big drop of interest in the technology itself, this is a key point for the technology in order to survive. Slowly but surely, the applications of the technology itself become more clear, what we actually can do with it. There's a clear added benefit. We suddenly really start to realize what we can do with the technology itself, how to utilize it, and go about. And we can also slowly start seeing second and third generation models more and more. And the final stage is the plateau of productivity. Here we can see there's sustainable business models. Finally, the companies that develop the technology start understand why they're doing this, how to make money. I think a good example here, back to VR, of course, is we can see in VR a lot of people producing huge amount of content, but there's not really a business model behind it at all. People are not making as much money with it rather than just selling the headsets. But once they get there, once there's a sustainable business models, there's mainstream adoption. A lot of people start using the technology. Take a look at, for example, smartphones or mobile phones in general, where I think in the 90s, there's some videos online. People were asking some passerbys on the street, do you think you want a mobile phone? Do you think you need a mobile phone? And people were replying, no, what would I do with a mobile phone? I got a phone at home. And now there are even names for the fear of losing your mobile phone. It happened in such an incredibly high pace. It's a very interesting development, and virtual reality is kind of heading towards the same track here. So in this final stage, we exactly know what to expect from the product itself. A lot of people are using it, and they're sustainable business. Now, if we take that model, look at VR, we could argue for multiple things. We could either say it's almost going down. I would expect that next year, once everyone has the PlayStation VR and starts realizing that VR might not be as attractive maybe as possible, or what they really expected of it. And I think that's a very big challenge that we're heading out with now. Things like augmented reality, Microsoft HoloLens, etc., is really big, and it's something that's easier to use all day, every day, rather than virtual reality, which is more of a singular, intense experience in which we completely put ourselves aside from the real world. On augmented reality, we enhance our existing world. Now, there are two major things holding back the potential growth of VR, I think. We could see that mobile VR is a very big thing now. It's a very convenient way of watching VR, of using virtual reality. The big problem, though, is actually bandwidth, because the bandwidth is not sufficient enough yet to stream the huge amounts of data that's necessary for a virtual reality world, for a simulation to be streamed to your phone constantly while you interact with it. So that's one of the key things holding back the developments of mobile virtual reality at this time. And the second thing is that we don't really have a clue where this technology will settle. Now, as I said before, it's a huge hype. We're all really excited about it. But once that wow factor starts wearing off, where will it settle? Will we really just use this for gaming, like we see with PlayStation VR? Will we use it for training? Will we merely or primarily use it for health and training? And that's something, that's a very important question that we need to answer by looking at the possible applications of virtual reality that we have right now. We need more research, and we definitely need more experiments. And I think experimenting with virtual reality is something that's up to students primarily, but also companies, and to invite students in education to look at what possibilities we have when it comes to virtual reality, and therefore understanding where this technology might settle. Now, all in all, I think it's easy to be deceived in thinking that VR is the next big thing for a wide range of audiences. But there are still too many factors that are left unsolved. There are still too many puzzle pieces that don't seem to fit yet. And we need to try out as much as possible before we make a move to VR completely, like, for example, the social VR, where we might spend a few hours a day. Personally, I believe VR is going to play a very important part in our lives, but I question the timing of it all. It's the same with Google Glass. Augmented reality seemed to be a bit too soon for its time. I'm not saying there's no hope, but the possibility of false hope, I think, can be more devastating than just trying out. I'm sorry. I mean, the possibility of false hope can be more devastating than no hope at all. So, big question is, why are we producing this? Why does it work on specific platforms, and how will we work with that? With that, I spend around these 20 minutes on virtual reality to give you a bit of an idea on where we're at right now, what the biggest challenges are, and therefore wondering, is this really just a big buzz, or is it something that we can move forward with? And if there are any questions, I'd love to take any. And if not, I can just ramble on, of course, if you'd like. I got a question here that Zuckerberg said in 2014, quote, "One day we believe this kind of immersive augmented reality will become a part of daily life for billions of people," end quote. And how mainstream do you think that technology is really going to be? I think definitely, like I said before, virtual reality is something in which we completely seal ourselves off of the real world. And I think our generation, and some generations after us, will probably still be so entangled or entwined with the real world that we're not comfortable enough yet to really escape it permanently, or for the majority of time. And I think augmented reality, that is really going to take flight very quickly, because it's almost having your mobile phone, having your computer, having all the technology that we now see in different kinds of devices combined into one big device on our head, or as a lens in our eyes, or whatever shape it might take, and provide us with additional information on anything we're doing. I do think it's really going to be mainstream. Another question is, will VR headsets end up being more like TVs and monitors, which have largely become interchangeable commodities, or will they end up more like game consoles? And well, actually, that's a big question for me as well. In a way, like I just said, we're not sure, of course, where, if we look at the Gartner hype cycle, where virtual reality will end up. One thing's clear: it's a great tool for gaming, because we can really immerse ourselves in that fantasy world, which might be. I do not think it will become something like TV or monitors. I've personally been working a lot in 360 film, and fiction film is something we'll always be probably watching on a big screen rather than in virtual reality, because it makes us too nauseous too quickly. It might change in the future, but for now, I think the biggest development will be in gaming consoles first, and then in health and education. Let's see. Lots of questions. Thank you for that. That's really nice. Do you think brands will develop apps which drives mainstream adoption of VR in people's everyday lives? Yes, I definitely do think so. Branded VR, branded content is going to be a very big part of it all. Developing VR is quite big and might be quite time consuming, and therefore, of course, very costly. And I think advertisers are constantly looking for new ways to engage with their audiences. And if there's a way in which we can completely, or at least make sure that they see our ad, or are immersed within the world around which our advertisement exists, then I think virtual reality is one of the big tools, or perhaps even the most important tool for marketeers to start using and get people involved with their brand and experience what the brand values are, or experience the branded content, the branded entertainment that these brands will produce. Okay, another question here from a teacher at Avans. How do you think VR will be used in the classroom, and how long will it take? You have examples of successful use as well. I think it might take a while for virtual reality to really set in classes. I think augmented reality might be a bit sooner in that. A very nice example, I think lately there's a video that's suddenly gone viral on an augmented reality app in which people that are studying medicine, studying biology, can look at a skeleton, for example, completely take it apart by moving their hands and moving the body parts around. And I think that really goes to show the huge potential it has, because we're able to view these situations from a completely different perspective. Another thing, like I said, if it's a lot cheaper. If I need to teach my students how to fix a car and I need to bring in a broken car every time, or a car in general, it might be very expensive. But if I can just simulate that situation, which is exactly the same as reality, then students will learn as much as regular, perhaps even more. Another question here: how big is the advertising agency market that can produce VR content? I'm not sure if there's really VR content developers that necessarily are advertisers. I think there are a lot of VR developers, and I think that advertisement agencies are approaching them to collaborate on projects for brands to start making VR content. But like I said, it's difficult to well, it's not necessarily difficult to produce, but it's costly, it's big. And one of the major things is that we need to make sure that whatever content we're producing works for virtual reality. It needs to be 360. There needs to be some degree of interactivity, perhaps, because otherwise you might as well just make a regular video, or perhaps make a poster campaign. So that's a big question. Why? Another question here: Apple seems to be silent in this market for now. What do you think they will end up doing? Very nice question. I get it from my students as well. I personally think, and I think a message or press release came out 2 days ago. Tim Cook already announced that they're leaving virtual reality a little bit for what it is right now, and they believe in augmented reality to be the next big thing. And I think it won't take that much longer before they will come out with their own augmented reality device. And if it's truly as Apple, as we expect Apple to be, it will probably amaze us and steal some market share, or as far as we can speak of market share, from the Microsoft HoloLens. I think Microsoft and Apple in that respect are going to be two major players on a relatively short term when it comes to augmented reality. Okay, our final question: should I already buy my own VR headset now? Well, if you want, I mean, the thing is, technology is going to develop at such a rapid pace, right? It's the same with your mobile phone. If you buy a new iPhone 7 at this point, or a new Samsung phone, then probably within a year it's the older version. In virtual reality, I think we can almost expect the same. Then again, it really depends on what you're going to use it for. So I'd say if you're really into gaming, try out the PlayStation VR. But if you just like to get some VR experiences, a cardboard could be more than enough. And that's a very cheap option. But the quality will be a bit lower. But it's definitely worth a try. So I definitely go out and buy an easy headset to come by. Okay, well, thank you all very much for being here, for listening to the talk, for asking so many questions. Very happy with that, and I hope I've answered them to the best of my capabilities and answer your questions. If you'd like, I put my email address right here in the final slide. So if you might have any questions in the future, or like to have a call or a meetup, anything, you can let me know by just shooting me an email, no problem. And thank you all very much for attending. And I hope you have a lot of fun, of course, with the next talk.